So, class, after discussing the assurance, no, we'll now go to the definition of audit. Okay? So, what is audit? So, audit is an objective examination of actual evidence. So, you examine that evidence that you've gained or you've got, right? And it is also providing an independent and reasonable assurance against an established criteria. Remember that we are providing assurance, so we should be independent. And since we are providing, since we are doing audit, we should provide a reasonable assurance as against what? Unestablished criteria. And again, your established criteria, it's your Philippine accounting standards or your Philippine financial reporting standards. And this definition actually came from or come from the International Framework for Assurance Engagements, or the IFAE, or in the localized version, it's our Philippine Framework for Assurance Engagements. Okay? So, with audit, we have two types. So, first, we have what we call the external audit. And according to Brinksmore, Modern Internal Auditing, your external audit is an independent examination of financial statements of an entity that enables an auditor to express an opinion whether the financial statements are prepared in all material aspects in accordance with an identified and acceptable financial reporting framework. And the example of this is the international or the local or the Philippine accounting standards and some national legislations. Okay? So, just like with assurance engagements that we have discussed earlier, we now give a context to assurance engagement, which is external audit. Okay? So, specifically, the external audit is again an independent examination of um, what do you call this, subject matter financial statement of an entity. So, who is the practitioner? An auditor who is expressing an opinion. So, this is the conclusion whether again the subject matter or the financial statements are prepared with the suitable criteria, or what we call here the identified and acceptable financial reporting framework. Okay? So, that is the external audit. Now, another type of audit is what we call the internal audit. So, if in assurance and auditing principles, we've only touched a portion of the internal audit. With the operations auditing, we drill down further. Okay? When we say internal audit, this definition actually came from the IPPF, or the International Professional Practices Framework of the IIA, or the Institute of Internal Auditor. So, again, what is internal audit? It is what? An independent, objective assurance and consulting activity. Okay? So, it can provide both objective assurance and consulting activity. That is the same to what? Add value. So, please do remember, when we hear the word internal audit, its purpose is always to add value and also improve an organization's operations. It also helps in the organization accomplish its objectives by bringing a systematic, disciplined approach. So in operations auditing, there are different kind of systematic and disciplined approach. Okay, to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of the three disciplines that we are discussing earlier. First is what? The risk management, the control or the control processes, and the governance process. So please do remember that if we are talking internal audit, we are evaluating and improving the effectiveness of these three disciplines: the risk management, the control processes, and the governance processes. Okay? So, in a three-party relationship in this internal audit is that we have first the person or group directly involved with the entity, operation, functions, process, systems, or other subject matter. It's your process owner. Okay. The person or the group making the assessment, it's the internal auditor, the one who is making the assessment. And the person or the group using the assessment is what? The intended user. Okay? So, the next slide will be differentiating or comparing the two audit. Now, as to focus, with internal audit, it provides what? Financial, operational, assurance, consultative, governance, computer, and fraud-related service. So you see the diverse services that we can provide in terms of internal audit. No, it provides several focuses. Okay. Now with external audit, it primarily attests to financial statements and where applicable, also internal control relating to financial reporting. So you can see here the focus is that attestation to FS for the external audit, while for the internal audit, it covers a wide range of activities or services. And one of the service that we can provide is what? Operational service or the operational audit. Now, as to the management, um, with internal audit reports to audit committee, no? I mean, the internal audit reports to audit committee and management administratively. Again, going back to my organizational structure, the internal audit report functionally to the audit committee and administratively to the management or to the president and the C officers. They also build relationships throughout the organization, identifies issues and concerns, and addresses their prompt resolution. Whereas with external audit, they primarily report only to the audit committee, not anything to the management. But of course, they have some interaction or communication to the management as to the representations that the management is making. Okay, with the internal audit, aside from their reporting functions, they need to build relationship. Of course, if the internal audit wants to improve the operations, they need to have a good relationship or a good soft skill in order for them to have a good interpersonal skills, and they can easily get information from the auditee or the audit client in terms of getting evidences or reviewing some processes. Okay, if you have that kind of good relationship with your auditee, then definitely the internal auditor would not have a hard time doing audit in terms of checking the process and procedures. Okay, of course, if they identified issues and concerns, they can easily raise it to the auditee or the audit client. And if the company has a good culture in terms of also a good what you call this matured risk management culture or risk culture, then it's a good thing that the audit client will be more not really hostile, but they are amenable or they are good with any findings that could be provided with recommendations in order to improve their operations. If they have a risk mature organization, definitely any finding would be easily handled by the process owner, and they are more responsible in terms of resolving any issues identified. And definitely a prompt response or prompt response to the finding that they got from the internal auditors. Now, as to the audit committee, the internal audit usually reports directly to the audit committee, as mentioned. They provide insight into and analysis of the organization's business risk, financial statement, system of internal controls, and level of compliance with laws, regulations, and policies. Again, gone are the days of the internal audit just do some balance and check. Of course, they need to consider the risk. Okay, they do not just check the controls for the sake of doing audit. They need to they need to do risk assessment in order to identify the risk and determine the controls. And of course, if there are any control deficiencies, they can report it directly to the audit committee. Of course, with some compliances, they can also check, and of course with the systems of internal control. Now, for the external audit, they provide financial statement attestation. And of course, if applicable, also the internal control relating to financial reporting, okay, to the audit committee or the board of directors. Often, they provide updates on pending accounting pronouncements and their potential impact on the organization. So, if there are any new standards, or if there is an update in the standards in the coming reporting period, they can actually provide some insights or updates as to what will be the impact of that standards to the accounting policy and procedures of the company. Okay, and what will be their effect to the financial statement in quantitatively. Okay, they can provide that kind of simulation. Okay. Now, as to the standards, internal audit, they follow the Institute of Internal Audit's international standards for the professional practice of internal auditing, or the ISPPIA. Okay? I'm mentioning this a lot of times, no? So you should be familiar by now. Now, for the external audit, it applies auditing standards required in the local country or jurisdiction. In the Philippines, we are using what the PSA, or the Philippine Standards on Auditing, and several frameworks for assurance engagements and other standards also. Okay, so there are many standards in relation to doing external audit in the country. So this, of course, of course, that came from the international standards also. Okay. Now, as to the approach, the internal audit generally follows a predefined methodology, but often customized approach to appropriately meet individual assignment objectives. Of course, with the performance of the audit engagement, they follow a certain methodology. It's already predefined methodology. Of course, if there are any special items that need to be considered, if the management requests some, if the board of directors or the audit committee requests some special audit or review, they can customize the engagement in order to perform this kind of individual assignment. Okay? As to the external audit, they generally follow an approach based on the audit firm's audit methodology. It will depend. Like with auditing firms that we have in the country, each audit firm has their own audit methodology. Okay, they use some audit packages in order to that is coming from the global partner firm. Okay. Now, as to the independence, with internal audit, the independence demonstrate organizational independence and objectivity in work approach, but is not independent of the organization. So, is it clear to you? When you say demonstrate organizational independence, remember that in our what you call this organizational structure, that the internal audit should be what? Separate from the management. They should not be reporting to the management. They should be what? Directly reporting to the audit committee. And of course, there should be an objectivity, meaning they should not be biased in doing their work or task, or rather, if there are any issues, they should not be easily swayed by any opinion by others, or they should not be swayed by others. Okay. So in here, IA should be independent of the activity audited, but is integral to the organization. Meaning, though they in the organizational structure they are organizationally independent, but they are still employed within the organization. That's the meaning of it's not, but it's not independent of the organization. Okay, so physically hindi. Physically they are with the employees of the company. But as to the function, they are organizationally independent. Okay? With external audit, they provide what? Again, financial statement. Okay? And I think there is something wrong with this slide. But in terms of independence, definitely the external audit should be independent of the organization, physically and functionally. Remember that the external audit directly report only to the audit committee. Okay, they don't have any administrative reporting to the management. Okay, and of course, if there are any threats to independence, there should be what you call the safeguards. Okay, if a certain person within the audit team doing the external audit is or has a financial interest, or has a stocks on that audit client, of course, we need to remove that person from the audit team in order for the company to remove the conflict of interest or the financial interest, so as not to really have an impairment as to the independence. Okay. Okay. Next, as to the results, with internal audit, they identify issues or findings, make recommendations, and assist in facilitating resolutions. So when we say facilitating resolutions, they maintain the list of findings, they perform follow-up procedures, they monitor the progress of the resolution to that finding. Now, as to the external audit, external audit meets local statutory requirements. They determine if the financial statement are fairly stated or free of material error. So basically, that's the result of the external audit. They issue the audit report indicating their opinion as to the fairness of the financial statements in accordance or in accordance with applicable financial reporting framework. Now, again, with the internal audit, they provide the findings, recommendation, and monitoring of the progress of the resolution to the finding. Again, okay. Now, to the control, with internal audit, they assess components of the organization's internal control framework, focusing on control improvement and operational efficiency and effectiveness. Okay. Then under SOX 404, they assist in assessing the adequacy, effectiveness, and efficiency of the financial and operational systems of internal control, including the design and operating effectiveness. So it's not only on the operating effectiveness but also the design. There might be a design of the controls, but it is not operating effectively. So that's a different case. Okay. In here, they also check the design and operating effectiveness of the system of internal control of each activity of the organization, including control over financial reporting. Okay? They can assist in documenting internal controls, testing internal controls, and or providing input to the management with respect to concluding on the design and operating effectiveness, as long as they do not assume any management responsibility. Let's say, for example, drafting the policy and procedures, no? Implementing it, they cannot actually provide that kind of service. What they can do is actually only to assist and do some non-management functions. Just more on testing, reviewing, providing any recommendation. Okay. Now, as to external audit, controls considered in the audit of financial statements as required by local country standards. So, the external audit also check the effectiveness of the controls over the financial statement or over financial reporting. Now, under PCAOB standards, it external audit opines or provide opinion on management's assessment of the effectiveness of the organization's internal control over financial reporting and on the effectiveness of the organization's internal control over financial reporting. Sorry for the typo errors, okay? In the course of assessing the organization's internal control, they evaluate also the capability and effectiveness of the internal auditing. So they can also provide actually evaluation of the effectiveness of the IA team. Okay? Okay. So also with in terms of risk, with internal audit, they identify and qualifies key business risks to estimate the probability of occurrence and the impact on the business. So they perform this risk assessment. The assessment, they check the frequency and its impact. Okay, they also makes appropriate recommendations as a result of the risk assessment. So whatever the result of the risk assessment, they can provide recommendation if they see that the risk response is not enough to, or the risk response that the company has put in place is not enough, no, that will make the company um meaning that the risk is above its appetite, they can provide a recommendation. Okay. they can report this if the company will have any more risk response or stringent response in terms of addressing the residual risk. Okay, of course, with residual risk that has been or that have been assessed or evaluated by the internal auditor, they should check if this risk residual will not be over the risk appetite of the organization or the business. Okay. Now, with the external audit, they identify key financial reporting risks. So, risks that are only pertaining to financial reporting in relation to its audit of the organization's financial statement. Now, with internal audit, all key business risks, meaning significant business risks. It can be, business risks can include different risks like operational, reputational, legal, and many more. Okay. Now with fraud, as to internal audit, they are focused on fraud awareness within an organization. They may include fraud detection steps in audit programs. They investigate the allegations of fraud and review management's fraud prevention controls and detection processes. And makes recommendations for any improvement with regard to their fraud detection and prevention controls. Okay, but then again, there is a certain standard saying that this internal auditor should not be really expert in terms of handling any real fraud case. The function really of the internal audit is to really check if there are any fraud indicators or red flags, okay, or any awareness. They should report it to the management. Okay, they can also check the again the or assess the management's fraud prevention controls and detection processes. But then again, if there are any proven, they can do so. Okay, if there's an actual fraud, there's an expert who can do this fraud investigation. It's more of the fraud examiner or the forensic accountant. Okay, with external audit, uh, as to the fraud, it includes fraud detection steps in the audit plan, gathers information necessary to identify risk of material misstatement due to fraud by inquiring of management and others within the entity about the risk of fraud. So it's more of really getting, it can be that there are a certain questionnaire or interview with regard to identifying if there are any risk of material misstatement due to fraud. They also consider the results of analytical procedures performed in planning the audit and the fraud risk factor. So during the stage of doing analytical procedures in the financial statements of the company, if there are any what you call this unexplained analysis in terms of changes between the amounts between the years and its relation to other accounts or related accounts, and there are no explanation there and then that could be an indicator of a fraud risk. Okay, so if there is not really an alleged fraud, no, but rather there is a unusual movement that cannot be explained, they can inquire the management in order to get their representation. Okay. Now, as to recommendations of the internal audit, they communicate recommendations for any corrective action generally to the auditee, management, and the audit committee. So all the findings or the recommendation should be reported to all stakeholders or users that needs that information about improvement over that finding or any corrective action. Now, as to the external audit, they communicate recommendations for corrective actions generally to senior management or the board of directors. Okay? Actually, they both report the recommendations to all the stakeholders because well, providing recommendation from both internal and external audit um, basically will improve the processes, okay, of the company. Okay, as to the follow up with internal audit, the follow up with audit is to determine whether work is sufficient to achieve the issue resolution. Okay, so in this case with internal audit, all issues and the recommendation, they can actually make a follow up regardless of the area, whether it's operational, financial, okay, reputational, etc., etc. Now, for the external audit, they only limit follow-up primarily to financial areas only. And of course, some internal controls over financial reporting. Okay, so you see, with the internal audit, it has a broader scope as compared to the external audit, which is only confined with the financial reporting. Okay, now, after discussing the difference between external and internal audit, we go now to ethics. So we all know ethics is more of we know what is right and wrong. Okay. Now, the we as accountants and auditors, aside from knowing the right and wrong, we should be I mean, when there's no one looking, we should know what to do. Definitely we know the right and wrong, but of course if we follow what is right, then we are ethical. Okay, of course, there's another case between another case where if there's an ethical dilemma, you are prone to uh, you know, you have two options. Of course, you know what is wrong, what is right, but it seems that on the wrong side, if you choose that option, it will benefit you, but it is unethical. Okay. So an example of this would be, for example, you have a sick brother that needs a huge amount of money. Of course, you have that kind of opportunity to do some um, misappropriations in terms of getting fund. And you know for a fact that if you do this fraud, meaning you steal cash, you can be expelled from the company, or you can be criminally liable because in the first place you will steal money, right? You are torn between two options, so that's where ethical dilemma. But we all know that must do the right thing. Okay, of course, if you have other source of income, you can do other alternative, like you can borrow some money from your friends in order to fund the medical expense or bill of your brother in the hospital. Okay, so if there are options available, then good. You, really, you don't need to do the wrong thing. Especially if you're the auditor or the accountant, you should be reporting truthfully or honestly to your stakeholders. Okay? So now we go to ethics. Okay? When you say ethics, these are your set of moral principles and values. It came from it can come from laws and regulation. It can be coming from church doctrine. It can also come from code of business ethics. It can also come from your code of conduct. Meaning, these are the minimum expectations set by the management in terms of discharging functions. No? These are acceptable ways or activities in discharging your function or your duties. Okay, ethics are necessary for a society to function in orderly manner. It actually also serve as the glue that holds the society together. Okay, what is the opposite of ethical? Of course, unethical. When you say unethical behavior, it is a conduct that differ from what they believe is appropriate. Okay, they choose this because a person's ethical standards are different from the society as a whole. It can be coming from a belief that this parang you believe that this act is acceptable to to your group, but in the society it's not. Let's say, for example, you are born in a drug cartel. You are born in a drug organization dealing with drug cartel, and you know that the organization is earning money, and it seems that uh, to you that earning money from drug operations is um, just all right, but where in fact, no, if you live outside that organization, it is illegal. Of course, if you uh, grow up on that organization, you believe that it's normal, but definitely it's not. That's what unethical behavior is. It is a conduct that differs from what they believe is appropriate. And another source of unethical behavior is that a person chooses to act selfishly. Okay? Of course, if a person wants to gain something, like for example, financial gain, he can act selfishly. He can take advantage of the opportunity given to him at at a disadvantaged position of another that will sorry that will give another entity or individual at a disadvantaged position. So that is unethical behavior. Now with the IPPF, so here's the IPPF, the International Professional Practice Framework for the from the Institute of Internal Auditors. So it is under also the mandatory guidance in here. Here's the code of ethics, because in the mandatory guidance we have four. We have the core principles, the definition of internal auditing, the ISPPIA, and the code of ethics. Okay, with your standards, we have here the attribute and the performance standards, FYI. And then for the recommended guidance, before it was the position paper, guidance paper, it is now named as implementation guidance and supplemental guidance. These recommended guidance are highly, it's not required, but highly recommended. Okay, and the overarching uh, this framework is the mission of the internal auditing. Okay. But actually, we're not discussing here the mission of internal auditing. If in case you are interested in knowing the framework, it is in the Red Book or the International Professional Practices Framework. It's a good reading of the standards in terms of, in the discipline of internal auditing. But now, we are just touching here the Code of Ethics, coming from IPPF. Now, we need to discuss here the purpose of what? Code of Ethics. Okay. According to the IPPF, the purpose of Code of Ethics states that the principles and expectations governing the behavior of individuals and organization in the conduct of internal auditing. So the Code of Ethics here provides the principle and expectations, not only just in the from the behavior of the individual, but also of the organization in doing the internal auditing. It also describes the minimum requirement for the conduct and behavioral expectations rather than specific activities. Rather than checking the specific activities, it is directed on describing the minimum requirement of the conduct and behavioral expectation. It also, well, the Code of Ethics also promotes an ethical culture in the profession of internal auditing. So, if the company has a good ethical culture, they have a high regard with ethics. Of course, the company is in the right direction. Okay? You can expect a good or a good a religious compliance of the individual and departments to the policies and procedures, because they have a good ethical culture. If the company has a good ethical culture, definitely they have a high regard to the risk management, governance, and internal controls. Okay? And Code of Ethics has two essential components. Okay? We have first the principles, meaning principles that are relevant to the profession and practice of internal auditing itself. And second is the rule of conduct that describes behavior norms expected of internal auditors. So for the rule of conduct, it's more of directed to the behavior norms of the internal auditor or the people in the internal audit activity. With the principle, it is principles of ethics that is relevant to the profession and practice of the internal auditing in general. Okay? In the discipline itself. Okay? So we go to the So of course, we'll be discussing the component here, the rule of conduct. Okay, so for the first one is what we call integrity. When we say integrity, the integrity of internal auditor establishes trust and thus provides the basis for reliance on their judgment. Of course, if the internal auditor has that integrity, in terms of course, integrity will, I mean, it shall be earned through what you call this, the skills, the qualification of the internal auditor. Okay, if the internal audit is really good in doing his or her job, of course it establishes trust. Okay, and if there's a trust, it is a basis that provide a basis for reliance on their judgment. Of course, if there is no integrity, how would your stakeholder rely on your judgment if you do not have that kind of integrity? Again, if you have a good high, if you have a high regard in terms of integrity, and it resonates to your audit work, of course, the result of your judgment will be, your judgment will be relied upon the stakeholders. Okay. Now, in terms of, another slide, in terms of integrity, no, here are some expected norms. Okay, so one is that in order to have that integrity, internal auditors shall perform their work with honesty, diligence, and responsibility. Okay, so if you do your work in honest, and you are diligent in doing your work, and you are very responsible, you establish that integrity. You earn also that integrity. And of course, they shall observe the law and make disclosures expected by the law and the profession. Okay? Of course, there's a what we call confidentiality. But if it is required by the law and the profession, you are exhibiting integrity. Okay? Because you obey, or you obey the law, you observe the law. Next is that internal auditor shall not knowingly be a party to any illegal activity or engage in any acts that are discreditable to the profession of internal auditing or to the organization. Okay, so you should not be any party to any illegal activity. So let's say, for example, if you're an internal auditor, no, and you are connected to any illegal activity, like for example drug activity, or like for example gambling activity, then you are giving discredit to the profession. Okay, and if you are doing that kind of activity, of course you do not have integrity in doing the audit, and with that you refrain in doing internal auditing work. You are refrain from doing internal audit work. Next is that internal auditors shall respect and contribute to the legitimate and ethical objectives of the organization. So remember, again, as internal auditors, we are helping the company in improving the organization through our evaluation of the risk management, the governance, and the control processes. Okay? Remember, we shall respect and contribute to the please remember the legitimate and ethical objectives of the organization. Okay, if it is unethical, illegitimate, of course, we shall not be a party or a person who is helping or involving him or herself in that kind of activity. He or she should refrain from doing that further. Okay. Bottom line, the assumption here is that the objectives of the organization are most likely legitimate and ethical. Okay, and they should respect and contribute to that. No, through they should include it in their audit objective, that they should check this kind of papers or documents that would know if the company is really going where it should be. Okay, If not, then they should provide recommendation in order to improve. So that's how you contribute to the legitimate and ethical objectives of the organization. Now we go to another uh, aspect, what we call objectivity. When we say objectivity, internal auditors exhibit the highest level of professional objectivity in gathering, evaluating, and communicating information about the activity or the process being examined. In here, internal auditors make a balanced assessment of all the relevant circumstances and are not unduly influenced by their own interests or by others' informing judgment. So, in other words, the internal auditor should be not biased, no, in doing their work. They should not be what? Unduly influenced by their own interests or by others informing their judgment. Okay. Example of this is what we call, the example of this is the conflict of interest. For example, financial interest. Okay. If a person has this kind of shares or investment, then the person should not be part of the audit team. Others could be like, for example, if he or she has a family relationship in the company, or he or she has a family, let's say for example brother, sister, or even relatives, um, they should be not included in the audit team. Okay, because they can be unduly influenced. Of course, that's your family relative. If you will provide the you if you do audit and you have a finding, most likely you don't want to disclose that finding. And one control that we can have is that a safeguard is that we do not engage that person in doing the audit, wherein he or she has a family relationship uh, in the what do you call this, in the responsibility party that we are doing audit. So for the rule of conduct, internal auditors, in terms of objectivity, shall not participate in any activity or relationship that may impair or be presumed to impair their unbiased assessment. This participation include those activities or relationship that may be in conflict with the interests of the organization. So, for example, what the relationship that I'm pertaining to is the family relationship that the auditor has um, a close family relative to that organization. um, we should put controls or safeguards in doing the audit. Okay. Activity can also be what we call this one, not disclosing any material fact or finding. Okay. If the internal auditor will not disclose that finding, then there's an impairment of objectivity, right? Next is that the internal auditor shall not accept anything that may impair or be presumed to impair their professional judgment. So, in other words, receiving gifts or facilitation payment or bribery. Of course, the internal auditor can accept value or gift of value that are minimal or insignificant. For example, um, an audit client will give calendar or pay or pen. Of course, the internal auditor can accept that gift, no? Unless those calendars and pen are made of 24 karat gold, then definitely do not accept that kind of gift. If you The reason behind is that if you receive the gift, it may sway you to 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 change your finding if there are any finding to that department. Of course, you have that kind of gratitude that you receive a gift. If we put control, like we do not receive any gift, especially if it is of significant value, then that's a control wherein any finding we can actually disclose it. You do not have kind of gratitude of really not disclosing the finding. Okay, so that's a control. Next is that Internal auditor shall disclose all material facts known to them. If not disclosed, may distort the reporting of activities under review. So that is in connection with what I have said earlier. Okay? Anything that is of material fact should be disclosed to the um, audit committee, because if not, it may distort the reporting of activities under review. Of course, if there is a department we're in, or a division that is in a loss, and they reported that they are operating in a profit, and you found out that they are operating at a loss, and you did not disclose, and after some time or after several periods, the division, the company felt the loss of that division, that is a violation of the objectivity rule of conduct of the auditor. Okay? So, as much as possible, disclose all material facts. Okay? Because specifically, if this fact will have or will definitely affect the organization in the near future. Let's say, for example, in that case, if the division is incurring losses, and after 2 to 3 years, the company felt it because they are running out of funds, then that is the impact of not disclosing the material facts. So you see the repercussions of not disclosing material facts to the audit committee or the board of directors. Okay. So what are the potential impairments? First is the past or future work of assignment. So let's say, for example, you are part of the operations, and then after 6 months you move to internal audit, and you are assigned or tasked to do an audit. If that is the case, no, you have that kind of self-review threat. So there is an impairment in terms of objectivity. So the rule in ISPPIA, you need to wait for 1 year before you can perform an audit to the department where you previously came, or you previously come from. Okay? Next would be conflict of interest. Example again of conflict of interest would be family relationship and your financial interest. We also have gifts and gratuity. So, meaning receiving gifts, of course, will of course impair objectivity. Again, because it may it may uh, um, give you, it will, you'll be gratitude of that client, and you will not present the true finding, okay, of that department uh, when you are done with the audit. Next would be assignment of non-audit function. Example would be, again, with audit team or internal audit, we are just what? Assisting, facilitating, reviewing, evaluating. But if we are assigned to do management task, so we are assuming management responsibility, our objectivity is impaired. Unless otherwise, it is a small organization and there are safeguards in place and there are no options left, there can be an alternative to that by placing again safeguards. Okay. Also, with scope limitation. Okay, meaning the management, you have this kind of review and you want to cover certain departments, but the department cannot accommodate you. Then that is scope limitation. That is impairment of objectivity also. Why would they not allow you to do audit? There might something in the department that is, they are keeping something from that department. Maybe some fraud, okay? So that is a scope limitation already. Also, we have here the resource limitation. When we say resource limitation, if we don't have any skills, or skills enough to do the audit. For example, we have a sophisticated instrument within the company, and an expert would be needed in doing the audit of that kind of complex instrument. And since we don't have that kind of person in order to do that specialized or complex transaction in doing audit, then that is a resource limitation. Then we also have access restriction. For example, the access restriction would be, you want to review documents, but the audit client is not giving you the document or restricting you from accessing the documents or the servers or the computers, that is an access restriction. That is a what do you call this, a potential impairment for objectivity also. Okay. Then we have also confidentiality. According to ISPPIA, or the IPPF rather, confidentiality in here means that internal auditors respect the value and the ownership of information they receive and do not disclose information without appropriate authority unless there is a legal or professional obligation to do so. So, as auditors, of course, we should be privy of the information that we are collecting. We should not, we know that there are some confidential information, that there are information that should not be disclosed outside. We should respect that value and ownership. No, the ownership is, of course, that is the ownership of the company. We should respect that. And in order for us to respect the value and ownership, we do not disclose that information. Okay, unless there's an appropriate authority. No, meaning to say, you are called by the court to provide some evidence. Of course, you need to follow the court in providing that information or disclosing that information. Okay, sorry. Without appropriate authority. If there's an appropriate authority, let's say for example, legal or professional obligation to do so. My example earlier, like the court, you can disclose that information without actually um, getting permission from the company. Because why? That is the court. I mean, it is a legal obligation to do so. Okay. Well, with the professional obligation to do so, example would be the uh, if you're an accountant, okay, or I mean, if you are internal auditor and some regulators would require disclosing information, let's say for example the SEC, then you need to provide that information. Okay, but basically the good example here would be the court. If they are getting information from you, you need to disclose that information to them because the law requires it. Okay. So in here, for the confidentiality, the rule of conduct is that internal auditors shall be prudent in the use and protection of information acquired in the course of their duty. So should be prudent. Example would be they should be careful in if they have their hands on that confidential information. Let's say for example in the laptop, they should be prudent or be careful. If in case that laptop is lost, you need to report to your IT in order for the IT to do some remediation in recovering probably the data from the computer, probably through cloud, if that is possible. Okay? Next is that they shall not use information for any personal gain or in any manner that would be contrary to the law or detrimental to the legitimate and ethical objectives of the organization. So they should not use that confidential information for personal gain. Let's say, for example, you have that kind of insider information that you should not disclose, that you should not use. No, it is also included in confidentiality, and you know for a fact that insider information would cause the prices of the market value of the stocks to go up after some time, and you buy already stocks before that happen. No, if you use that information for your personal gain, then that is your you are breaching the rule of conduct pertaining to confidentiality. Okay, and you should that another example is that you should not sell that information to a third party. Let's say for example, companies who are doing marketing efforts or need that information for their marketing efforts. No, you should not sell that information. Okay? Definitely, if you sell that information, that information might it might go to their competitors, and they are at a disadvantaged position, of course. That will be detrimental to the legitimate and ethical objectives of the organization. Okay? Next, we have the last one, what we call competency. Okay? When we say competency, internal auditors apply the knowledge, skills, and experience needed in the performance of internal audit services. Okay, so in order for the internal auditor to be competent, no, they should apply what? Or they should have the knowledge, the skills, and experience, and they should apply it in order to perform their work or internal audit services. And in the rule of conduct, internal auditors shall engage only in those services for which they have the necessary knowledge, skills, and experience. Of course, they shall not perform services wherein they don't have any knowledge, skills, and experience. If they have the and necessary knowledge, skills, and experience, then they can do the work. Okay. Of course, in an audit team, it should be collectively assessed. No, if one person is really an expert in doing that audit work, then definitely the audit team is competent in doing that audit work. Okay. Also, internal auditor shall perform internal audit services in accordance with the international standards for the professional practice of internal auditing. Okay. So they shall perform only internal audit services in accordance with the ISPPIA. Then lastly, internal auditors shall continually improve their proficiency and effectiveness and quality of their services. So in order to maintain that proficiency, they need to attend to continuing professional development, example, seminars, webinars, in order to be updated with the current trends in doing internal audit work. No? If they do not continue to improve their proficiency, of course, they will be, there will be an impairment of competency, or they will be, well, I don't know if that is the right term. They will be incompetent in the future. Let's say, for example, for my scenario, I I am a CPA, or I got my CPA certification last 2010. And there are a lot of improvement in the standards. And of course, in order to be competent, no, I attended many seminars and webinars, no, in order for me to be updated and continue to improve my proficiency. If in case I did not attend seminars and webinars, might probably I'm not anymore competent enough to teach you the current trends or updates in the financial reporting, in management accounting, in other areas of accounting, and of course with auditing. Okay, so they should continually improve their proficiency, the internal auditors, to be competent. Lalo na ngayon, abilis yung technology natin. Of course, it would have an effect in our standards, in accounting standards, in auditing standards. We need to, well, now the emerging technologies, of course, data analytics. So if you have an idea about data analytics, then good. 10 years ago, data analytics is not, I mean, it's not existing, or was not existing. Data analytics was just, it just happened, I think, or it just transpired um, early 2015, if I can remember it correctly. So example of the data analytics is, of course, Facebook. They use data analytics in getting the the behavior of the Facebook users, and through that behavior, they can provide advertisement of products that would uh, tailor to the behavior of that user in the Facebook. Okay, so yung bago na yung data analytics. So we should also be updated with that. So that's how we continually improve. Okay, so that's all for the code of ethics. So uh, if you have any questions, you can PM me through Teams. So thank you guys for listening.